Well, I'd like to thank you for coming today. We're going to talk about one case that turned into 90 or 200 cases, charges on two individuals. These two individuals are responsible for almost 25% of the residential burglaries this year. The reason we're having this press conference is to, one, highlight some very fine work of Detective Aaron Myhre, and to do some education of our citizens in reference to these type of prolific criminals that need to be held accountable. We have a property crimes issue because we are not holding property crimes suspects accountable for their actions. I'm going to be watching this case. I'm going to be watching how it proceeds through the system, because these are the type of individuals that need to be taken off our streets for quite a while. Mr. Trevor Burzic was arrested today for 111 felonies. He was arrested on September 5th, and he was released on his own recognizance after his first appearance on two of these burglaries. Damian Zowal was arrested for 90 felonies. He has remained in the Spokane County Jail on a $10,000 bond, and that is a very low bond. These individuals, again, are responsible for 25% of our residential burglaries in this county. They also committed burglaries in Ponderay and Stevens County. Because of the fine work of the Spokane County Sheriff's Office, Detective Aaron Myhre in particular, and because of our citizens that were very engaged in this investigation, they identified and reported suspicious people, suspicious vehicles, were able to identify tattoos that ultimately led to these people being arrested. So I want to thank the citizens of Spokane County for helping us keep them safe. I'm going to introduce you to Lieutenant John Knowles. Lieutenant Knowles is going to walk you through the intelligence-led policing effort that was used in reference to this. I want to remind you that in 2007, the Spokane County Sheriff's Office totally changed the way we do business as far as investigation of crime. We implemented the intelligence-led policing systems, which we currently use, and it has allowed us to make these type of arrests over the last several years. John?
Thank you, Sheriff. Again, when we talk about intelligence-led policing, it's a methodology we use to allocate resources and look at investigations in a different way than we traditionally have here in Spokane County. Back in, I guess, early summer, we started to notice an increase in residential burglaries up in North Spokane County, outlying areas, really rural residential areas. So we began collecting information best we could on those types of incidents, and over time the number kept increasing. Luckily for us, as the sheriff indicated, we have a lot of citizens who were paying attention to what was going on out in those neighborhoods. They were seeing suspicious vehicles, suspicious men on motor scooters and things like that. It turns out that Mr. Burzic and Mr. Zowal would go up to a residence they thought may or may not be occupied. They'd knock on the door to see if anybody was home. If nobody was home, they'd then force entry into the home at some point, targeting jewelry, firearms, and other high-value items, but mostly jewelry and firearms, which they knew they would probably find out in these rural areas. So thankfully, due to a couple of very observant citizens, they recognized Burzic and Zowal from tattoos that they had on their arms. They took the time to call Crime Check and report these instances to the sheriff's office. And without some of these tips, it would have been very much more difficult to identify these two. Luckily, about late August, we were able to pull all the information together that we had been gathering for the previous months and able to come up with an identity on these two gentlemen. At that point, we began an investigation in earnest to locate them and produce good felony charges on them. Again, they committed at least 40 burglaries that we are charging them with, and almost 200 felony charges in relation to those burglaries. Some of those charges to include first-degree first-degree burglary because they were armed with firearms when they did that. It's important for the citizens to know that at least one of these individuals was found armed when he was arrested after we watched him commit some burglaries. And the statement was made to us that they knew they were going to be going into residences where firearms were, and they may come into contact with citizens who are armed, and they were prepared to deal with that eventuality if need be. These very dangerous young men who really were doing this because of an addiction to the powerful narcotic Oxycontin. So it's very important that we keep these two young men in custody simply for the fact that they're a danger to the citizens of Spokane County, aside from the fact of the prolific burglaries that they were committing. There was a real danger to the community with these two young men out. I cannot stress the importance of citizens providing good information to us. It was key in helping Detective Myhre identify these two and locate them and ultimately take them into custody. With that, I will turn some time over to Sergeant Chris Thompson, who's the supervisor for the Investigative Task Force, and he'll talk a little bit about the investigation that Detective Myhre conducted.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Without rehashing everything we went through with the intelligence-led policing process, after Detective Myhre had identified potential suspects, the investigation began in earnest at that time. It became in both physical and electric surveillance monitoring. After we identified the personnel and their vehicles through reports and physical surveillance, Detective Myhre applied for and was granted global positioning satellite search warrants. We placed these items on our suspect vehicles and at the time did both the electronic and physical surveillance, hoping to catch them committing a crime so we could take them into custody and ensure the safety of our citizens in Spokane. On September 5th, while doing surveillance, we suspected they had committed a number of burglaries that day and went through the process of trying to confirm those burglaries before we took Burzic and Zowal into custody. Obviously, we had to go to the house after they departed, made sure that a burglary had occurred, tried to get hold of homeowners at that particular time to see if they could identify any of those particular things. So when we took them into custody, we'd be able to collect the evidence to support charges of burglary. And that's exactly what happened. On that particular day, they were able to determine that they committed 2 burglaries. And during one of those, we were able to determine that firearms were stolen, which obviously hastened our investigation and our desire at that moment to get them into custody. They're armed, they're breaking into houses, you never know when someone's going to be home, and we don't want anybody to get hurt. So they formed a plan, took the 2 into custody, and when they took them into custody, they were actually in the process of ingesting the drug Oxycontin. That particular day, they were booked in the Spokane County Jail. Mr. Zowal was booked for 2 counts of residential burglary, first degree, because he's armed at the particular time when we took him into custody. Mr. Burzic was not. He was booked on 2 counts of residential burglary, which is a lower classification of felony. Still a felony, but 1 degree lower because there's no use of firearm on his part. Since that time, the investigation has continued on. It just didn't end at that point. There's the collection of evidence. We'd seized the vehicle they were driving that particular day, as well as that day we went to their residence and collected evidence that was pointed out. They did cooperate to some degree at that time and point out evidence that was taken from a number of burglaries, not just that day, but over a longer period of time. With the establishment of, we've determined 40 burglaries, you can guess how much stuff they had. And we did. It was a large cache of stolen property that we took. Then the arduous process of trying to identify through reports, interviews, and excellent detective work by Detective Myhre and everybody in the investigative task force that helped. Detective Myhre executed a search warrant on the vehicle that we took into custody that particular day, and we recovered more firearms, more stolen property that we were able to link to those burglaries that day and other burglaries. After completing that search warrant, collecting that evidence, he continued on with his investigation, applying for search warrants for both Zowal and Burzic's phones. We have some electronic capabilities that allow us to pull information from these electronic devices. They store a lot of information. Everybody knows that you have a smartphone, you have a lot of storage, and things are stored even there once they're deleted. He went through that information, pulling it off the both phones, and was able to determine communication between them and others of these burglaries that they committed, where the property was at to some degree, and some of the things that we weren't able to recover, we were able to determine that they did sell. Obviously, we're still looking for those items, but we were able to recover or identify a number of other firearms. Then came the task of putting it all to paper. The affidavit that was completed and turned in was well over 70 pages. There's hundreds of man-hours invested in this investigation. And when we turn those in to the prosecutor, it's an arduous task for them now. They're going to go through, they have an amount of time to get these things in there. And we're working in cooperation with our prosecutors. They're working very hard with us to make sure the appropriate bonds are set, the appropriate judicial procedure is followed throughout. And as the sheriff has mentioned, we're going to follow that throughout. We still have a lot of work ahead of us identifying property. We're attempting at this particular time to set up a couple of dates where we can have victims of these burglaries come in and view some of the property we have not yet been able to identify. And Detective Myhre has been reaching out to them doing this. But these two are a danger to the citizens of Spokane County. Mr. Burzic, after being released after a short period of time, was out pawning firearms stolen during his burglaries, basically showing no remorse for his actions. He went out and pawned stolen firearms that he could have turned over to us at that time. But due to his reasons, his addictions, he chose not to tell us about those and pawned them. And those are charges that have been added to his booking at this time. But with our citizens, we say thank you. We ask for your patience as we reach out to you. And we have citizens in outlying counties that we're still working with, and the detectives in the sheriff's office and police departments in these counties, as we've identified a number of burglaries out there. We know they did 40. We believe they did more. They need to be held in for their safety and for the safety of our citizens. Sir?
Just to recap, I can't stress the amount of effort that went into this investigation, not just by our office, but also our citizens. These reports by our citizens didn't happen by happenstance, ladies and gentlemen. We have put such a net over Spokane County and established electronic email lists that go straight into the sheriff's office from our citizenry. The Green Bluff area, as soon as they started seeing this spike in residential burglaries, were emailing all information that they could to the sheriff's office because of the electronic net we have put over our county. This has been very effective for us. I urge every community within Spokane County to reach out to their law enforcement jurisdiction and establish this type of communication net within our county. It is because of these efforts, your vigilance, that we are able to put these individuals in jail. Again, these individuals are responsible for 25% of our burglaries this year. They are dangerous. They were willing to shoot citizens if they were going to be encountered. When one was released out on his own recognizance, he went immediately back into his criminal behavior. Pawning stolen firearms, as Sergeant Thompson said, he could have turned those firearms into us, shown cooperation that he was working with us. Instead, he committed more crime. These individuals need to be held accountable, and it's time for our criminal justice system to say enough. We're tired of repeat offenders. If we do not get these two young individuals' attention this go around, when they are 40, we will be having this press conference again. We've seen it happen over the last 2 decades with individuals that we all know their names. So it's time for us to make sure that this situation does not repeat itself and we protect this community. Any questions?
Chief, Sheriff, were you at all surprised by the fact that bond was so low and that one of them was released on their own recognizance, given what they were facing?
That has been a trend since 2008 when the economy went down. It's been a trend since 1995 when the Spokane County Jail was identified as being overcrowded. We have a system that is at maximum capacity right now. The Spokane County Jail is so overcrowded that our judges realize that it's very difficult to keep people incarcerated because of the overcrowding. I can tell you, when I was a property crimes detective, it was not unheard of for me to walk into a judge's office, say, this individual needs to stay in jail, I need a very high bond, and get a $50,000, $100,000 bond. We don't see that anymore. We rarely see that anymore. And that is because of the pressures put on the criminal justice system because of an inadequate system. So I am very concerned about those issues, and so should the citizens of this county be concerned about those issues.
In your mind, what could be done to change that?
We are working through the blueprint for reform in this community. We need to step that effort up. We've had several meetings over the last 2 months, 3 meetings. The blueprint's been out for almost over a year. 3 meetings in a year is not going to solve this issue. And those meetings need to start becoming productive meetings, not sitting around trying to figure out who's going to chair what committee or having me fill out a form so I can sit on a committee. We need to sit down and get a good grasp of what we've done for the last 8 years, because the blueprint was based on all the work that we did over the last 8 years. Everything in that blueprint is things we've already talked about. We need to pull that information out, dust it off, put it on the table, determine what is still viable and what needs to be reworked on. But until we really step up our efforts to start implementing the blueprint for reform, we're not going to get to the really hard parts of, well, how do you really deal with a jail that is pushing 675 inmates in a facility that's designed for 464, and you're continually on emergency or critical booking, or you're on red light status, which means if a deputy or an officer makes an arrest today and we're on red light status, they will sit outside the jail for anywhere from 1 to 4 hours with the inmate or the suspect inside their vehicle because we can't get them inside the Spokane County Jail, effectively eliminating our manpower out on the street. Those are the things that need to start happening, and happening very, very fast and short order. We can't have any more meetings that we just do housekeeping. We need to get to the bone and the meat of this problem. Any other questions?
Yeah, can you think of another case where you had suspects involved in so many burglaries and facing so many felonies?
Yes, I can. 2012, we arrested 217 people during a 2.5 month time frame because we saw our residential burglary rate in the first quarter of 12 go up 54%. We formed a burglary task force, we did a lot of intelligence-led policing work, and we arrested a lot of people. We charged a lot of people for many, many counts, some over 50. And if you really want to do a good story on this one, go find out what happened to all those arrests. One group, 90 days is all they received for 50 burglaries. And as a matter of fact, they weren't charged with the burglaries. That was pled down to trespassing. What kind of message did we send? We sent a message that there is no accountability. When we arrest somebody for 50 burglaries, at least one of those charges that they get convicted of or plead to should be a burglary, not trespassing. Within short order, those individuals were back out on the street, and I believe that we arrested them twice before we got them back into the jail. So those are the frustration that these men and women out on the street deal with continually. We arrest them, and they're back out. It's even more frustrating for them when they arrest them out of a stolen car with stolen property with drugs in their pocket. They put them in the back seat, and they look up at the deputy, and they say this, "I'll be out in 3 days." And sadly, they are. That needs to change.
Can I give a statistic? Detective Myhre, when he was talking to all of his complainants, and it's important to keep in mind the cost to our citizens, the cost just in the loss and dollar amount from these burglaries was in excess of $100,000 just from these two young men. Well in excess of $100,000. So there's a huge cost there. How much are we willing to bear to say it's okay and we release them? That's something to keep in mind here. There is a dollar amount affixed to this for the citizens. So.
Any other questions?
Just one more clarification. When did this spree start? Beginning of the summer?
Started during the latter part of the summer,
Okay.
and I believe it was within a couple of weeks of us getting the information from the citizens, we were able to start the tracking and put these people in jail. So, right at the end of July, we started seeing the spike. By August, we had formed a plan. We received information, and we made arrests by the end of August.
And then you said they were in like the Green Bluff area?
The North Green Bluff area, to include other counties, Ponderay, Stevens County. So it was north end of Spokane County. Green Bluff, the reason I mentioned them is because of the electronic net that they joined. It was because those citizens were sending us emails straight into our intelligence unit that, hey, we're seeing this happening, we're seeing that happen, that we were able to start putting this puzzle together. So I really can't stress enough the effectiveness of the net that we have put over Spokane County over the last 4 years, because it has become one of our greatest assets.
Is there anything in this case that you think will allow them to be in the system, in jail longer than the other ones you cited?
I don't have great confidence of that happening. All I can say is it's going to be my mission to watch this case and to make sure that it is walked through all the proper channels and that there is accountability in this case. These young individuals, at least one of them made the statement, yeah, I was carrying a firearm because if I was confronted, I was going to deal with that issue. Translation, he was going to shoot a homeowner. That needs to be highlighted. He had every intent of shooting one of our citizens, one of your friends, one of your family members. He had that intent. This needs to be made sure that this individual is held accountable. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much.